Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Ballinger, Logan's dad, and this is Logan's Voice, a podcast I started after my son was taken by fentanyl poisoning. This space is for truth, healing, awareness, and action. Today's topic is one that more people need to understand. The drug supply on the streets isn't just dangerous, it's changing fast. You've heard about fentanyl, but now we're seeing even more toxic substances showing up, like Xylazine, a veterinary tranquilizer, and Carfentanil, which is literally used to sedate elephants. These are being mixed into pills and powders, and most of the time the person using has no idea. Here's something to think about. If I handed someone a drink that had poison in it, and they drank it and died, I'd be charged with murder. No one would question that. So why is it different when someone gives or sells a pill that's been laced with fentanyl or xylazine or carfentanil and the person dies? That's not an accident. That's a death that could have been prevented. We're seeing more states pass what's called death by delivery laws, laws that carry harsh penalties for those who distribute drugs that lead to a fatal overdose or poisoning. And here's something else. Even if you don't know the pill you gave someone was laced, even if it wasn't your intention to hurt them, you can still be charged with homicide in some states. About 4.5 years after Logan was poisoned by fentanyl, I looked at the death certificate while I was writing my book, Logan's Story. And on the death certificate, the cause of death was listed as overdose due to cocaine and fentanyl. Something about that made me more curious, so I did a FOIA request for all the documents connected to Logan's death. One of them was the toxicology report. And right there on the toxicology report, Xylazine was listed. But for some odd reason, that wasn't included in the cause of death. And that makes me wonder, how many other families are losing loved ones to poisons they don't even know about? How many cases are we not even counting correctly? Had I not done that FOIA request for the toxicology report and police reports associated with Logan's death, I would have never known Xylazine was in there. I don't think anyone was trying to hide that fact from me intentionally. I just think that our system doesn't count correctly. And that's why I'm here. That's why I started this podcast. Because my son didn't die from just fentanyl. He died from a toxic mix of chemicals that no one told him were in that little bag. Today, we're going to talk about where these drugs come from, why they're being added, what makes them so deadly, and what needs to change if we want to stop this from happening to more people. So let's get into it. So what are these new drugs? Let's start with the basics. We already know that fentanyl, a synthetic opioid up to 50 times stronger than heroin, has taken over the street drug supply. But now, new substances are showing up, and they're even more unpredictable and deadly. Let's talk about two of the most dangerous ones we're seeing right now, Xylazine and Carfentanil. Xylazine is a veterinary tranquilizer used on large animals like horses and cattle. It is not approved for human use, not even in small doses. And on the street, it's often mixed with fentanyl, heroin, or other opioids to enhance the sedative effect and prolong the high. But here's the thing, Xylazine isn't an opioid, which means Narcan cannot reverse it. So if someone overdoses on a combo of fentanyl and Xylazine, Narcan might bring them back from fentanyl, but they can still slip away because of the Xylazine. And xylazine also comes with horrifying physical side effects. It causes severe skin ulcers and tissue damage, sometimes leading to amputation. It depresses the central nervous system and slows breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure, often fatally. And it creates a kind of zombie like sedation where people may be slumped over or completely unresponsive for long periods of time. And the worst part, people don't know they're taking it. It's not sold as tranq, it's cut into other drugs. You might think you're using heroin or fentanyl or even taking a pain pill, but what you've really taken is a lethal cocktail you never agreed to. One thing I have trouble wrapping my brain around is why death dealers, drug dealers, put these types of substances in their street drugs, especially when their way of making money oftentimes relies on repeat business. Why would you put something in your supply that's going to kill your customers? It might not kill them all, but why kill one? And then there's carfentanil. This one is almost too horrifying to believe, and yet it's out there right now. Carfentanil is a synthetic opioid that's about 100 times stronger than fentanyl and 10,000 times stronger than morphine. It's used to sedate elephants. It's not meant for human beings, ever. Just a few grains of carfentanil, we're talking less than a single grain of salt, can be enough to kill someone. It's so potent that first responders have overdosed just by touching or inhaling trace amounts while trying to help someone. And yet, it's being found in street drugs. Just like fentanyl, it's being added to heroin, cocaine, meth, counterfeit pills without the user knowing. And there are other emerging drugs. There are others you may not have heard of yet, like nitazines, a potent synthetic opioid even stronger than fentanyl. Etizolam and flubrozolam, I'm going to butcher those words every time. Dangerous benzo analogs that mimic Xanax but last longer and are more sedating. Isotonazine, another synthetic opioid linked to a growing number of deaths in the United States. Most of these are made in underground labs overseas, then shipped into the United States, mixed into the drug supply, and passed off as something else. And they're hard to detect, even in toxicology screenings. Some medical examiners don't even test for them. And you may ask yourself why you should care about this. I say this with all the seriousness in my heart. You do not have to be an addict to die from these drugs. You could be experimenting. You could be taking a pill you thought was Adderall or Xanax from a friend's drawer. But if it's been laced with carfentanil or xylazine or one of the other poisons we talked about, you don't get a second chance. This isn't just an overdose crisis anymore. It's a poisoning epidemic. And people like my son, people like Logan, are being taken from us because the drugs they got weren't what they were told. They were death in disguise. So now that we've talked a little about what these drugs are, let's talk about where they're coming from, because they're not just showing up out of nowhere. This is a global, multi-layered problem, and it's being driven by profit, power, and disregard for human life. Most of these ultra-potent synthetic drugs, including fentanyl, xylazine, and carfentanil, are manufactured in labs overseas. China has been a major source of precursor chemicals, the ingredients used to make synthetic opioids. Some of the actual finished drugs, like xylazine and synthetic benzos, are also made in China or India and then shipped around the world. And the Mexican drug cartels play a major role in what happens next. They take these raw materials and mass produce counterfeit pills, powders, and mixes in clandestine labs. They're not following any safety protocols. Their goal isn't consistency, it's maximum effect at minimum cost. And once these drugs are packaged, they cross the border, often in bulk, and get distributed across the United States through networks of dealers and middlemen. And the scary part, some even make their way directly to users through the dark web or encrypted messaging apps delivered right to the mailbox like an Amazon order. But I'm asking myself again, why are these substances being added? It's not a mistake. Dealers are adding these poisons to the drug supply on purpose. But why? One word: potency. These substances are cheap and incredibly strong. A tiny amount can stretch the product, increase the high, and lower the cost of production. Let's say you're a dealer. You've got a kilo of fentanyl, and you want it to go further. Add a little xylazine or carfentanil, and suddenly you've got something that hits harder and lasts longer, and you can sell more of it. It's dangerous, it's deadly, but from a business standpoint, it's profitable, and that is all they care about. And it's also about control and dependency. These additives make people more sedated, more addicted, and less able to stop. Xylazine, for example, increases physical dependency and withdrawal symptoms. It gets people hooked even faster. And dealers know this, and they use it to their advantage. The person buying the drug, they usually have no idea what's in it. They didn't ask for xylazine, they didn't ask for carfentanil, but they get it anyway, and they're the ones who pay the price. There is no quality control. It's just like Russian roulette. There's no standard dose when it comes to these street drugs. One pill might have a small amount of fentanyl, the next might have enough to kill 5 people. And now, when you throw in xylazine or carfentanil, it's not just an overdose, it's chemical warfare on the human body. Every pill, every bag, every line. It's a roll of the dice, and you don't get to see the odds. And these drugs are closer than you think. You don't have to live in a big city to be at risk. This stuff is everywhere, from rural Arkansas to downtown Los Angeles. Small town kids, high school students, college athletes, young adults with jobs and futures and families. The supply has made its way into every corner of this country, and it does not care who you are. In Logan's case, I didn't know about xylazine until I read the toxicology report 4.5 years after he died. And even then, it wasn't listed in the official cause of death. But it was there, and I can't help but wonder, if it hadn't been there, would he still be here? Now, let's talk about something that might feel impossible to understand. The mindset behind lacing drugs with deadly substances like fentanyl, xylazine, or carfentanil. Why would anyone knowingly do something that could kill someone? Why would they want to put these poisons into the hands of people who don't even know they're taking them? The truth is, it comes down to money, power, and addiction, not human life. It's about stretching the product. The street drug game is built on profit margins. Dealers and traffickers want to make their product go further, to sell more for less. When you cut heroin with fentanyl, or fentanyl with xylazine, or carfentanil, you can use a tiny amount of the expensive substance and stretch it with something cheap. They oftentimes add fillers just to make the product go further. Fentanyl is already potent, but carfentanil is 100 times more powerful than that. Xylazine, which is dirt cheap and easy to get, can give the illusion of a longer high, tricking the user into thinking the drug is stronger or better. It's not about quality, it's about maximizing profit while minimizing overhead. You're not dealing with scientists in lab coats. You're dealing with people who don't care what happens to the person on the other end. I'm going to repeat that. You are dealing with people who do not care what happens to the person on the other end. And it's about hooking users faster. Adding drugs like xylazine deepens addiction. It makes withdrawal more intense. It makes users come back faster and more often and more desperately. That's good for business, even if it destroys lives. Think about that. They are intentionally making the drugs more addictive, more damaging, and more likely to kill just to keep people trapped in the cycle. That's not accidental. That's predatory. And it's about control. There is a psychological and physical component to this too. If someone's tolerance builds up to fentanyl, adding a new sedative like xylazine creates a stronger, more overwhelming effect. The person doesn't know what's in it, but they came back to that dealer for the same stuff. It's a twisted kind of brand loyalty. It also why some people overdose the moment they switch suppliers, because the mix is different and they weren't prepared for the dose. And there is a total disregard for the user's safety. Street dealers aren't chemists. They're not measuring milligrams with lab-grade tools. They're eyeballing powder, stirring it into bags, pressing it into pills with illegal pill presses in hotel rooms, basements, and back alleys. There's no quality control, no regulation, no dosage standard. One pill might do what the user expects, and the next pill might stop their heart. And because the user doesn't know it's been laced, they don't know how much Narcan to carry, or what symptoms to look for, or when they're in danger until it's too late. And here's the harsh reality. Most of the time, the person selling that pill or handing it off at a party or through a text doesn't even know what's in it either. They're not the chemist. They're just the middle link in a deadly chain. But guess what? In a growing number of states, that doesn't matter. If you're the one who gave someone the pill that killed them, even if you don't know it's been laced, you could still be charged with homicide. These are called death by delivery laws, and they're getting stricter every year. You can go from a friend to a felon in a heartbeat, not because you meant to cause harm, but because the drug supply is so poisoned and unpredictable. And this is what happened to Logan. He didn't know what was in the bag. I don't believe he meant to die that night. But he was served a cocktail of death by someone who probably didn't know or didn't care what they were passing along. And that's why I'm telling this story. Because if we don't speak up, we're going to keep losing people who didn't have to die. And this next part, this one's personal. Because everything we've been talking about so far, the lacing, the silence, the poisoning, it showed up in my own son's toxicology report. Logan had xylazine in his system. That's not speculation. That's not an assumption. It was right there in black and white. And yet, when I look at the official cause of death, xylazine wasn't listed, not even as a contributing factor. The medical examiner listed fentanyl as the cause of death, but not the xylazine. That shook me. Because if it was in his body, if it played a role in the sedation and respiratory depression that ultimately killed him, how could it not be listed? I started asking questions, and what I found out made me angry. So, why isn't xylazine always listed? There are a few reasons, and none of them are good enough. Xylazine isn't a controlled substance yet. In many states, it's still legal to possess. That means it's often not included in standard toxicology panels unless someone specifically requests it. And medical examiners prioritize the primary drug. If fentanyl is present, they may stop there, even if xylazine or other substances also played a role. Because underreporting protects the system. The fewer xylazine-related deaths that get documented, the less attention and accountability there is. And when it's not listed, it's like it never happened. No data means no problem, at least from an institutional standpoint. But for families like mine, it matters because it tells a bigger story. Because Logan didn't die from fentanyl alone. He died from a combination of drugs he didn't know he was taking. If Logan's toxicology missed the official cause, how many other reports are doing the same? How many deaths are being labeled as overdose when they were actually poisoning with a chemical cocktail? If we're not counting these substances, we're not tracking the real scope of the problem. And if we're not tracking it, how can we fight it? It's not just about accuracy, it's about justice. Accurate toxicology matters for families. It matters for public health, for policy, and for accountability. If a poison like xylazine helped end my son's life, then I want that on record. I want the people who distribute this stuff to be held accountable. And I want the system to stop treating these deaths like isolated accidents. We deserve the truth, and so does every family going through this hell. If you're listening and you're in a position of authority, if you're a coroner, a toxicologist, a policymaker, hear me when I say this. Start testing for xylazine. Start reporting it. Stop ignoring it. Because behind every toxicology report is a person, a life, a shattered family. We can't fix what we won't admit is broken. What can we do about it? So now that we've walked through the reality, the substances, the supply chain, the motivation, and Logan's own story, let's talk about what we can do. Because I refuse to believe we're helpless. We might be hurting, but we are not powerless. There needs to be a push for better toxicology reporting. First, we need to demand more thorough and more transparent toxicology testing. If a drug like xylazine is in someone's system, it should be documented, period. Families deserve the full picture, and so does public health. We can't track this epidemic accurately if we're leaving poisons off of death certificates. That's how Logan's death becomes a statistic that doesn't tell the whole truth. We also need to push for legal reform, like the death by delivery laws we talked about earlier, but we need to make sure those laws are just. The goal isn't to punish people struggling with addiction. It's to go after the people profiting off of poison, the ones mass distributing lace pills and the supply chains, and they don't care if it kills someone. These laws can hold people accountable if implemented with compassion and precision, but they must be paired with treatment options, education, and resources, not just jail every time for low-level users caught in the crossfire. And we can fund harm reduction and awareness programs. Harm reduction isn't about enabling drug use, it's about keeping people alive long enough to recover. We need fentanyl and xylazine test strips, widespread access to Narcan, education campaigns that speak to young people in a way they'll listen. People need to know that one pill can kill, that not all Xanax is Xanax, and that every hit could be hiding something lethal. That's not scare tactics. That's the reality of today's drug supply. And speak out, even when it hurts. If you've lost someone, if you've survived an overdose, if you've seen what this crisis does up close, tell your story, please. I know it's hard. Talking about Logan still brings tears to my eyes. But I speak because he can't. And every time I do, someone reaches out and says, I had no idea. That's why it matters. That's why your voice matters too. And don't wait until it hits home. This isn't just happening out there. It's happening everywhere. If you have a child, a sibling, a friend, or someone you love, talk to them. Have the hard conversations. Talk about fake pills. Talk about fentanyl. Talk about xylazine and carfentanil and how deadly this game really is. Don't assume they know. Don't assume they're immune. And don't wait for the knock on the door that I got. Logan was real. He was a human being. He was my son. He was funny and kind and wild and complicated. And he should still be here. I'll never stop wishing I could go back and change what happened. But since I can't, I will spend the rest of my life trying to change what happens to someone else. If you're still here with me, thank you. I know today's episode was very heavy. It should be. These aren't just dangerous drugs we're talking about. They're silent killers. They're slipping into every corner of our communities. And they're doing it quietly, without warning, just like they did with Logan. What drug dealers are really dealing is death. They are death dealers. My son wasn't a bad kid. He wasn't trying to die. But what he took that night wasn't what he thought it was. And what was in that bag, a mix of fentanyl and xylazine, didn't even give him a chance to fight. And the system didn't even name the full truth on his death certificate, and that makes me angry. That's why I speak. That's why Logan's voice exists, because someone has to say it out loud. If you served someone a drink laced with poison and they died, you'd be charged with murder. But on the streets, people are serving up poison every day. And most of the time, nobody's even held accountable. That needs to change. And it needs to start with people at the top. People like mayors and coroners and other civic leaders. Laws are shifting, families are speaking out, and people like you who take the time to listen, to learn, and to share are making a difference. If today's episode has stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. Here's what you can do right now. Share this podcast. Talk about what you've learned today. Visit websites like Hope Movement Coalition or Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership. Look for information about harm reduction and grief support and action. Start the conversation with your kids, your friends, your community, even if it feels uncomfortable, especially if it feels uncomfortable. This epidemic feeds on silence, but I believe that love, real, honest love, speaks up, and love fights back. So until next time, I'm Doug Ballinger. Thank you for being here, and thank you for helping me carry Logan's voice forward. And remember, we don't need to be perfect, we just need to be present. Be safe, be aware, and above all, stay in the fight. I am Logan's voice. I am Logan's dad, and I will not be silent.
Walking the empty streets at dusk, shadowed memories start to rust. Every step feels like a chain, trapped in whispers of the past. Your ghost haunts these silent nights, faded pictures in the pale moonlight. Can't escape these endless dreams, where your voice silently screams. Lost in echoes of your name, broken pieces of our flame, shattered heart with all its scars, falling through like distant stars. Rain falls gently on my face, washing away our last embrace. Every drop's a tear I cried, a mirror to the pain inside. These streets hold our history, every corner a mystery. Now they're just cold and hollow, with sorrow's weight I follow. Time's been slow in my mind's eye, where you still linger, haunting sigh in the cinematic woe. Your silence is the loudest echo. Lost in echoes of your name, broken pieces of our flame, shattered heart with all its scars, falling through like distant stars. Lost in echoes of your name, broken pieces of our flame, shattered heart with all its scars, falling through like distant stars, falling through like distant stars. Lost in echoes of your name, broken pieces of our flame, shattered heart with all its scars, falling through like distant stars. Rain falls gently on my face, washing away our last embrace. Every drop's a tear I cry, a mirror to the pain inside.